don't have to give food to the spirits after they depart. Think about Israel's experience in the wilderness. Who did they depend upon when they needed food? They depended on God. They had to depend on God. They couldn't provide for themselves. God provided them with manna in the wilderness when they were unable to provide for themselves. God is the one who feeds His people. He doesn't need anyone to take care of Him. At the end of Oban, people in the Okinawan traditional religion will burn money so that their ancestors are able to have some. God doesn't need anything like that. God doesn't need anything from you at all. He is able to be perfectly happy even if people were not there to serve Him. But He is also the God who owns every beast in the forest, and He says that He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He is the God of the entire universe who has created everything that is and owns everything that is. He doesn't need people to burn money so that He will have some, because He is independent of all of us. We don't need to bribe Him or to win His favor, because He freely gives us everything that we need, even so far as to give us His very Son so that we would have life. Romans chapter 8, verse 32. He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also with Him graciously give us all things? God the Father gave God the Son as the perfect sacrifice so that you would be able to have life. And if He has given you what is most precious to Him, then He will surely give you everything else that you need as well. Our relationship with Him is one where He gives us what we need and we receive it. We're not able to do any sort of rituals or do anything that would bribe Him in order to make Him give us stuff. He is the one who gives us everything. So your blessings that you have in your life are not dependent on your performance in any way. There is something in Christianity that is directly opposite to the Okinawan traditional religion and all of the traditional religions. In these other religions, our performance helps us to get blessings. But in Christianity, God's performance gives us blessings, and there is nothing that we can do to deserve those blessings. God is the one that will graciously give you everything that you need, and He is the one who is even able to give you happiness after death. You have been freed from the Okinawan traditional religion when you believe in Jesus Christ. All of the Americans are kind of going, okay, yeah, what about me? Because it's hard for us to relate to these things in the Okinawan traditional religion. It's kind of interesting to hear it and all, but it's not the way that we think about things. Let's talk about Americans for a few moments. And let's talk about the fact that we are free from fate. Many Americans have a false belief, a religious belief, that affects the way in which they think about God. And that belief is a wrong belief, and it is called the idea of faith. And this is an idea, a religious idea, that can keep you in bondage in much the same way that the Okinawan traditional religion keeps people in bondage. And so in order to talk about this, the first thing that I want to talk about is the way that people think about faith in another religion, Thai Buddhism. And it will become apparent while I'm doing this in just a couple of minutes, but permit me to talk for a second about Thai Buddhism. In Thai Buddhism, they have the idea of fate, and whenever something bad happens, they have a way of explaining why this bad thing happens to them. The Egyptians and the Canaanite traditional religions explained bad things happening by the spirits. In Thai Buddhism, whenever something bad happens, it happens because of fate. The Buddhists believe that there is, in Thailand, the Buddhists in Thailand believe that there is an impersonal force that governs the entire universe. The reason that it's fatalistic is because no human being controls this power, and no spirit controls it. It's just something that happens. It's sort of like a cosmic law that governs the universe. And so when somebody does something bad, the universe is going to respond by causing something bad to happen to that person. And if somebody does something good, then the universe is going to respond by rewarding that person. So if you want to control your future, if you want to have an influence in whether or not you're going to have happiness, and you're a Thai Buddhist, the way that you would think about doing this is that you would do things that would ensure your prosperity. Certainly, you would try to do some good things in order to bring about blessings given to you by faith, this impersonal force. But you would also do other things that would control the universe as well. And one of the ways that you would go about that is you would try to pick the best dates on the calendar in which to do things. There are certain dates that are very good for having a funeral, and you would pick those dates. And there are certain dates that would be good for having a wedding. And so if you're going to have a wedding, you would pick those dates. And if you're taking an exam, likewise, there would be good days for that and bad days for that. But there is bondage that exists within this Thai Buddhism. You are still forced to do things that may or may not work in order to try to be happy. The Thai religion answers one of the important questions in life. Why do bad things happen to me? And the way that it answers it is by talking about this impersonal fate. And it has some sort of an answer. And in that sense, it is actually better than the American version of fate. Let's talk about the American version of fate for a second. We call it chance. And it is a religious belief that exists deep within us, something that is so a part of our culture that we are barely able to see it. But nonetheless, it is a religious belief that can hold us in bondage. Whenever an American is talking about chance, he is talking about something that just happens, something that does not have a personal force behind it, but something that determines how his future is going to turn out. So let's say that something bad happens. Let's say there's a big storm that ends up destroying your house. Let's say that you break your leg and somebody asks you this very important question. They say, why did this happen to you? The way that the American is generally going to answer that is they're going to say it was just chance. It just sort of happened that way. The wind gathered in such a way as to make a storm. The pavement was slippery in just the right place, and I slipped and fell. Nobody caused it, and nothing could have been done really to prevent it. And so your future, if you're a general American, is determined by forces that don't care whether you live or die. And we call that chance, or sometimes we call it fate. It's very similar to the Thai belief in fate, but there's a sense in which it is actually more depressing because it makes all of life seem meaningless. What determines my future? It's largely determined by things that are beyond my control, and I don't know whether these things are going to make things better or make things worse. I don't know whether chance is going to bring me blessing tomorrow or bring the end of me. And so Americans don't even have an answer for one of the most basic questions in life. We don't know why bad things happen to us. Let's compare the American view of chance or fate to the Christian view for a moment, and then I hope we'll be able to see how we have been set free from this sort of bondage. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. We believe that there is a God who is in control of this universe. We believe that there is a God who controls the events of this universe, even down to the smallest detail. And when bad things happen, God is going to use those bad things for something that is ultimately a good thing.